Swadika, we've got a wrap-up of the main stories right here on Morning Focus. My name is Pachuri Raksawong.
And I'm Matichon. Now, the Japanese officials continue to try to control the radiation leaks from the Fukushima nuclear power plant. Now, Kumpatri, the two main developments this morning is that Japanese officials are saying that there's a power line. They're trying to get a power line in to cool down the system, but also some issue of concern here, differing suggestions of how far away to stay from the zone. The Japanese are suggesting 20 kilometers.
The Americans are saying stay away as far as 80 kilometers. Yes, and we'll give you the details of that, including an update on the second day of the censure debate with commentaries coming from Thai newspapers as well. All that coming up after this very short break. Thank you for keeping it tuned right here to Morning Focus. Let's take a look at the main headlines coming from the local papers. And we'll begin with Thairat. Japanese emperor expressed his concerns over the crisis. Now, Japan's emperor came out to give a rare address to the nation yesterday as the nuclear emergency situation worsens, while millions struggle in desperate conditions after last week's quake and tsunami disaster. Emperor Akihito said he was deeply concerned about the unpredictable situation at the Fukushima #1 power plant, where he said he hopes that authorities can keep the situation from getting worse. And this marks an historic televised address, as it is the first time he has come out to speak publicly about a national crisis.
Right. Our next headlines comes from the Bangkok Post's sister newspaper, Post Today, and the headline says Tokyo deserted. The nuclear catastrophe has forced foreigners to desert the Japanese capital of Tokyo. Meanwhile, Japanese residents have moved away further south and have opted to stay indoors.
The world is very much saddened by what is happening in Japan, but also fear is spreading throughout the world as well, because Japan's nuclear crisis, that is deepening. Japanese authorities are still trying to de-escalate the situation at the Fukushima #1 nuclear power plant, which has been hit by a series of explosions after the reactor cooling systems were knocked out by the earthquake and the tsunami. And the radiation leak was at critical levels, as tens of thousands of residents have already been evacuated from within a radius of 30 kilometers of the plant, while authorities urge people living within 10 kilometers of the zone to stay indoors, to turn off the air conditioning. Well, they're not going to need air conditioning.
Right, it's cool already.
Right, and apart from that, we're also hearing reports that the U.S. government have warned their citizens in the area to stay away at least 80 kilometers away from the plant, and elevated levels of radiation were detected outside the 30-kilometer emergency area around the plants. And in Ibaraki Prefecture, which is just south of Fukushima, officials say that radiation levels were about, this is very alarming indeed, 300 times above normal levels.
Just want to add that this is the first time that Japanese and U.S. officials have come out with different advisories. The Japanese have said they should evacuate, people should evacuate 20 kilometers from the plant area. Now, the U.S. nuclear officials are saying for the first time that they should move 80 kilometers away. Meanwhile, there may be some hope where Japanese officials say they've completed installation of a new power line, which could restore the cooling systems in the nuclear power plant. Now, this raises hope of some positiveness in this crisis. Now, the new line would revive electric-powered pumps, allowing the company to maintain a steady supply of water to the reactors and the spent fuel storage ponds, keeping them cool. However, officials said that they'll try to get this power line on board as soon as possible, but the problem is they didn't say exactly when.
And a group of some 50 Japanese workers were tasked with keeping cooling water flowing into the reactors amid fears of an increase in radiation at the plant, while the rest of the workers have been evacuated from the area. Now, they have also tried to pump in seawater already to cool those reactors, but Japanese military helicopters officials were due to dump water on the nuclear plant to help contain the overheating, but they were eventually forced back due to radiation concerns. And experts believe that these workers will be exposed to a high level of radiation exposure, and their lives were at significant risk. And many even hailed them as national heroes who were risking their lives for the sake of others. And Japanese Prime Minister Matichon saluted the efforts and courage of the workers, saying that these workers were making their best effort even at this moment without even thinking twice about the danger.
Meanwhile, the human toll of the earthquake and the tsunami continued to escalate yesterday. Officially, the death toll rose to 4,300 yesterday, as many anticipated, Kumpachari, that it would rise over 10,000. Now, millions of Japanese without water, electricity, and fuel or enough food. There are about 452,000 residents staying in temporary shelters provided by the government. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of residents in the Northeast are bracing cold weather and wet weather in these conditions. So the situation is going to get worse, at least as far as the human toll is concerned.
That's right. And
meanwhile, we have some updates on the ties. 200 ties in Sendai, and so far they've not been able to contact them.
Plus, but some have returned back already, and those still left there, for example, in areas that's in Tokyo, some of the affected areas, they do express their intention to come back, but a lot of ties in Japan, Kunbishai, or in the areas that in the danger zones, if you will, there's scholarship students, and they don't have enough money to actually come back here to Thailand. And as international concern mounted, the chief of the UN nuclear agency said that he would go to Japan to assess the situation over there. And there has been growing concern at the UN's International Atomic Energy Agency, who have complained that information coming from Japan on the nuclear disaster is too slow and too vague. Now, this is very important that correct and updated information is disseminated so that the necessary measures can be taken.
That's right. I think there is a concern. I think they're faced with two issues. One is that how much information do you give out so that you don't cause panic?
Correct.
But on the reverse side, with not sufficient information causes doubt and suspicions. Meanwhile, 3 more U.S. Navy ships arrived off the coast of Japan. There was the USS aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan already there. In total, there are about 17,000 sailors and Marines ready to assist. Several thousand Army and Air Force service members are already stationed in U.S. bases in Japan, and they've been deployed and mobilized for relief efforts. Meanwhile, the Japanese government said they expect to ask for U.S. assistance soon, but did not elaborate. I think, Kumpachari, now we'll move on to the censure debate.
That's correct. The censure debate, the second day of censure debate yesterday. Finance Minister Korn Tatika, when it was grilled by the opposition over stock manipulation and a failure to collect excise taxes on imported cigarettes. And Pheu Thai party list MP Prakiat Nasim Ma alleged that the finance minister leaked the government's plan to buy Thaicom back from Temasek just to boost the stock price, which rose for days after the leak, while the government did nothing about buying the business back.
Meanwhile, on the collection of excise taxes on imported cigarettes, the opposition said that the finance ministry had failed to impose taxes on imported cigarettes. The opposition claimed that while locally made cigarettes were taxed, the imported items were brought in tax-free, costing the country billions of baht in revenue. The opposition also said that the ministry had turned a blind eye to the company's breach of contract with the Thai tobacco monopoly, where the company distributed imported cigarettes to trade stores, and this put local manufacturers at a disadvantage. MP Prakiat said that the company was contracted by the Thai tobacco monopoly to forward cigarette taxes to provincial administrative organizations, but had allegedly failed to do so.
Finance Minister Korn Jatikatwanit, meanwhile, said the allegations put forth by the opposition were old issues. And on the stock manipulation case, the finance minister said he was assigned by Prime Minister Apisit Weshashiwat to discuss the issue with Singapore-based Temasek Holdings, and he said he was asked by a reporter about the discussions and had to tell the truth. And his comments might have driven up the the price, but he had no intention of doing so. And he also insisted that he did not stand to gain from the share price increases and was never involved in Thaicom share trading, adding that he and his wife stopped trading shares in December of 2008 to prevent any possible allegations.
Yes, on the imported cigarette allegations, Kun Kon said he too was concerned about collection of excise taxes on imported cigarettes by local organizations, but he noted that it was beyond the ministry's power to do anything. He said that the excise department was merely a coordinator and not a collector, and that provincial administrative organizations were empowered to impose local taxes on cigarettes from local operators to raise funds for development projects in the area. Meanwhile, Kun Pachari, Transport Minister Sopon Saram, came under a lot of criticisms for the MRT's blue and purple line.
Yes,
You
I have
some
the details. That's right. Purtai accused Kun Sopon of being involved in irregularities, like you said, the Purple Line project, by seeking additional funding for the project in breach of the law. The opposition said the cabinet in 2008 approved a budget of 36 billion baht for the Purple Line project. Now, part of the budget set aside for reimbursement purposes was later reduced to 435 million baht from the 3.9 billion baht, but part of the budget earmarked for actual construction payment was increased from 29 billion baht to 35 billion baht without any authorized approval. The subcontract awarded to Sino-Thai Engineering and Construction PLC, with the budget increasing from 12 billion baht to 13 billion baht, was also not approved by the cabinet. And the contract was not made in Thai either, which is required by law. All contracts must be written in law, and that is actually intended to prevent administrative lawsuits. Could be shy.
Right. Meanwhile, criticism on the blue line, the opposition said that the budget there increased from 48 billion as approved by the cabinet in 2007 to 52 billion baht. The opposition also claimed that there were signs of collusion in the bidding process for this particular project. Said the contract was divided into 4 subcontracts, but only 3 companies had won the bidding. The transport minister, Kun Sopon, rebutted the allegations by saying that the request for additional funding for the Blue Line project was submitted by his predecessor in 2008 before he took up the post, and therefore he was duty-bound to follow the policy of his predecessor. He also added that during his tenure at the ministry, the overall budget from this project was reduced by 4.3 billion to 3.6 billion.
Also denied allegations of collusion, saying that the bidding process involved bargaining by private companies. And he also said the duty of the Transport Ministry is only to ensure the project is successful and in line with the law. As for the Purple Line project, he also rejected the graft allegations, as the contract has to be written in English to comply with requirements set by the Japan International Cooperation Agency, which gave the loan to invest in the project.
Meanwhile, we've got some commentaries from the Thai papers, and it appears that the opposition lead debater Ming Kwan Sang Suwan did pretty well. Thairat's Matichon said he appeared more aggressive and more ferocious. He was able to present very complicated issues in a simple and easy to understand language. And, that's a good thing.
Right, but however, Matichon said that Kun Ming Kwan was not experienced enough to match the Prime Minister. Kun Apisit, he's actually very, very skillful in a one-on-one debate.
It's always a tough job.
And Prime Minister Apisit's strength is his ability to draw his opponent to play his own game. So that is to hit back at his opponent where he can score points, and to not really touch on the points where he won't score as well.
That's right.
Anyway, he praised the opposition Purtai party of having done the homework very well, although the way the information was presented was not good enough because some of its MPs still lack the experience and the skill in such
Just
debates.
to add, Kom Chatluk gave Kun Ming Kwan a B+.
That's not
and
bad.
said that he presented, his presentation was refreshing, different to the yelling and screaming and the various parliamentary antics that we're used to.
And defined it as refreshingly new grilling tactics.
There we go.
Yeah.
We move on to the cartoon.
Yes, coming from Matichon, 2 executives from the coalition Cha Thai Pathana and Phumjai Thai parties are discussing their recent alliance to the public.
Yes, and they said they are forming this alliance because they share a common goal.
And one of the men goes, and what is that goal?
To make sure we get into the next coalition government and not the opposition. That's all we have for Morning Focus this morning. Any comments or suggestions, please email us at morningfocus@postnews.co.th.